Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on forgotten weapons. I apologize, there's not much space for me in this shot with this big old heavy machine gun on the table. Wanted to take a look at this one while I'm up here at the James Julia Auction House in Maine. This one's coming up for sale at their auction in May of 2015, and you know what, it's a rare and it's a very much underappreciated and relatively unknown heavy machine gun. This is a Schwarzlose model 1907/12. And this was the standard machine gun of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the standard heavy machine gun, during the First World War. It served pretty well. They were in use all the way through World War II with various different units. A bunch of different countries used them over the span of their lifetime. And frankly, they're really neat guns. You'll recall Andreas Schwarzlose, who was the designer of this gun, also developed the Schwarzlose blow-forward pistols, as well as a number of other very innovative early handguns and rifles. So the problem that he had when he was designing this guy was that most of the best mechanisms for heavy machine guns had already been patented by other people. And if he wanted to design and market a gun of his own, he had to come up with a different mechanism. And what he ended up coming up with was actually delayed blowback, not something you would normally think of for a heavy machine gun. Now, he did a really good job. One of the advantages of delayed blowback in guns is that it's very simple. There's not much going on. The breech isn't actually locked. What this does is delay the breech opening through a combination of a heavy spring and a lot of mechanical disadvantage to the bolt. So we'll take a look inside in just a minute. But first, let's look at a couple of the other major characteristics of the gun. First off, as you can see here, it's a water-cooled gun. This actually is another place where we have an advantage with a delayed blowback. The barrel doesn't move because this isn't recoil operated, which means it's a lot easier to seal the front and back ends of the barrel into the water jacket and avoid leaking because nothing's moving. On something like a Maxim gun, the barrel's cycling back and forth with every shot, and you have to come up with a way to actually seal that gap into the water. This one, not a problem. There's a fill cap back here, and a drain plug up here. Pretty simple. The water keeps the barrel nice and cool. As long as you keep it topped off, you can have pretty much unlimited continuous fire. These were made with very short barrels because one of the ideas that the Austrians were trying to go for was to have a lightweight heavy machine gun, something that was a little easier to transport and carry and set up. And so they went with, it's just barely more than a 20-inch barrel. That's why it's got this big flash hider on it, is to tame the flash from that. These were originally chambered in the 8x50 rimmed Austrian cartridge. So the same thing that the early M95 straight pull bolt actions were chambered for. Now those bolt actions were updated later on to 8x56 rimmed, which is what most of the ones we have available today are. Same thing goes for these machine guns. A lot of them, the ones that saw use in World War II, were typically rechambered for 8x56. The tripod here is a pretty simple affair. It's also lightweight. It's smaller than a lot of other heavy machine gun tripods. We have a nice arced gear tooth elevation adjustment here. There's no precise adjustment to it. You have a hand crank on the side that allows you to raise and lower the gun, but it's not set up for, say, mils or minutes of angle or degrees. It doesn't give you that level of precision. It does have some precision on the traverse panel here. Lets you slide the gun side to side. We'll take a closer look at that as well in a moment. So I think this would be a good time to pop the top cover of this gun and take a look at how it really works. All right, opening up a Schwarzlose is very simple. We have one big lever here that simply acts as a latch on the top cover. Pop the top cover, which will hold itself open. Now we can take a look at the internals. All right, so here we have the inside, the actual operating mechanism of the Schwarzlose. Like I said, it's delayed blowback. So what happens is it fires from a closed bolt, which first off is a little bit unusual for a heavy machine gun, and then pressure from the cartridge firing on the bolt here pushes backward, and it has to work against the mechanical disadvantage of several of these pivot points and levered surfaces. Now I can use the charging handle here to kind of bypass some of that, and you can see what happens as it opens like this. There's a big hefty recoil spring in the back that's putting compressive force on this whole assembly through this whole time. Now when I close the bolt, you'll notice that these two surfaces are no longer in contact with each other. That's because this is what's waiting to actually strike the firing pin and fire a cartridge. So when the bolt cycles, it comes to rest, bolt closed. You could say locked, except this is a delayed blowback gun. And then this is waiting for someone to pull the trigger like this. So when you pull the trigger, this bar is cammed upwards, and that allows this last section to drop the rest of the way, hit the firing pin, and fire the cartridge. Now if I hold the trigger, which I will do here, first off you can see the trigger is pulling back right here, which pulls back this bar, which is what pivots this arm up when it's in position. So if I hold the trigger down, simulating full auto fire, when I let the bolt come forward, you can see that the firing pin striker there at the back stays back for just a moment until the bolt's all the way in battery, then it drops and fires. So it opens. Here we are going into battery, and right about there, the bolt's fully closed, and it can drop and fire. One neat little detail here is this little just spring-loaded tab. What that does is hold the top cover open. So in order to close it, I push that forward, top cover drops down. When you open it, that automatically drops into place, holds it open for you. Rear sight on the Schwarzlose is a pretty simple mechanism. You can adjust windage on it by pushing in this little detent and then sliding your rear sight side to side. It does have notches on it so that you can tell exactly how far you're moving it. Elevation is done by this knob, which turns this rack and pinion, raises and lowers the sight. That knob is graduated for hundreds of meters out to a maximum of 2,400 right there. So one of the other very unusual elements of the Schwarzlose is its feed system. It's belt fed, but it uses a really unusual ratchet or sprocket type system that you don't see anywhere else. Now to open the feed cover, which is this whole panel, I lift this latch up, pull back slightly, and then drop this open. Now we can see the feed spinner, sprocket, spindle, whatever you want to call it there. We have a set of gear teeth up here, and then full tracks back here. So what happens is these teeth grab the front and the back of the cartridges while they're still on the belt and lift it up into the gun. There's then an extractor that pulls the cartridge off of the belt back into this position. In this position, it then rotates up into the gun. So cartridges come out of this feed sprocket down here, lifted up into the line of travel of the bolt, and then pushed into the barrel right here, ready to fire. So every time I charge the action on this, or the gun cycles on its own, you can see this mechanism turning the feed pawl. Like this. It's actually a pretty effective, pretty reliable system for feeding cartridges. It does have one interesting quirk in that from when you first pull a belt into the gun, in order to be ready to fire, you actually have to charge the gun 3 separate times in order to move a cartridge through all the stages up to the point that it's ready to fire. So similarly, when you decide you're done shooting, once you pull the belt out, you also need to charge it a couple times to make sure you clear the whole system. However, this was a pretty reliable system in use. Firing mechanism, the trigger mechanism for the Schwarzlose is a pretty simple double thumb switch, just like this. It has a safety in the middle, which is spring-loaded and always by default engaged. So if I just push on the thumb trigger, nothing happens. What I have to do is actually hold the safety over, then I can depress the trigger. And if at any time I release the trigger and let go of it, the safety comes back on. We have 2 handles here for holding and controlling the gun. You would typically fire with the handles in this horizontal position, and then you can actually pull them back, there we go, and lock them up for transport so that they don't get in the way, and it's a lot easier to stack the gun when you don't have the handles sticking out the side. This lever is for disassembly of the back plate of the gun, which we're not going to do today, but that allows you to take this whole rear assembly off. Certainly that's something you would potentially want to do for maintenance, and then that allows all the internals to come out the back of the receiver. On the top of the top cover here, we have our oil fill, just a little screw-in plug. There is also handily provided a little metal wire basket to filter out any chunks of debris that get into your oil. Okay. Fill that up every so often, keep it topped up, keeps your extraction working well. One more thing to take a look at while we've got the top cover open here is this, which is the oil pump. This is actuated by the bolt and travels back and forth once with each shot. It's a little sticky here, but that goes back and forth and slowly pumps oil out of the oiler onto the cartridges. Because this is delayed blowback, it does have a relatively high extraction pressure, and oiling the cartridges is necessary or helpful at least in getting good extraction. Well, thanks for watching the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. This is definitely a machine gun we don't get to see very often. There aren't very many of these floating around the US, and you know what? They're just cool. A lot of people don't realize what they are and what makes them cool. So this is going up for sale March of 2015 at the James D. Julia auction. If you'd like to own it, you know what? Give it a shot. There's no reason not to stick this right out in your living room with all of your other prized possessions. So if you take a look at the link in the description below, that'll take you to the Julia auction catalog. This is lot number 2029. You can check out Julia's high-speed pictures. You can check out Julia's high-res pictures, their description, everything else about the gun, and see what you think it'd be worth to you. Thanks for watching.